And as you find that inspiring you and you're out, because one of the questions I did want to ask you is these rhythmic ideas and grooves and possibly melodies and lyric ideas, it's easy enough to jot down a lyric, but when you're moved and inspired by an actual rhythm, it's easy to forget that if you have distance under your wheels and you're thinking about different things. How do you, other than writing down the name of the artist, how do you go about keeping those rhythms in your mind so that you can apply them to your next?
Yeah, it's a good point. And most of my rhythmic growth is evolutionary, so that what I've worked on grows into something else, grows into something else. But there have been the odd time that I would call epiphanies like that. And there's a rhythm that I used a lot in the late 80s or so, Nigerian music, West African music, with slightly displaced accents in it. And I heard that, I was in a village in Togo in West Africa.
On your 10-speed?
Yeah, traveling by bicycle that time.
Okay.
And just, I heard this rhythm echoing across the valley. And it was just two drummers with hand drums playing it. And it engraved itself on my mind. It became a huge influence on me rhythmically after that, because I'd been listening to King Sunny Ade, was a pioneer of Nigerian pop music, and a certain rhythmic accent syncopations that it was based on, that I was very influenced by at the time. And then this other rhythm that I heard that time in Togo was from that same heart. And the music that I heard, it lodges itself in my brain. It engraves itself in there. And then that becomes something special. And those are rare, I think, when you're suddenly hit by something that's that strong. Reggae, the first time reggae music really got into my soul, and I felt that upbeat, downbeat tension. Again, I'll never forget, it was Bob Marley's song, Natural Mystic.
Yeah.
Just sitting in a car and hearing that song, and suddenly I got it. I got what reggae was all about, where I'd heard it before but hadn't got it.
Would that happen to have been right before Signals?
It was early before that, because I had got into, that would be in the 70s for sure, before the new wave, the Police hybrid, Joe Jackson, even Elvis Costello, they had that hybrid of reggae rhythms into their music.
I heard those influences on some of the Signals.
They had grown by then, and they certainly came from me. But mine, it came out of the roots at that same period that other Western artists were incorporating those things. I was listening to them too. And really, I go back to talk about those moments, first hearing Billy Cobham play the upbeat ride.
Right. Yeah.
That was my first intimation of something that still continues to fascinate me, and we'll talk about it more, is that upbeat, downbeat tension. The coexistence of two rhythmic realities, and it's easy, okay, all drum beats have upbeats and downbeats in them, but the way they're felt. And a classical percussionist friend of mine told me his professor called them, syncopation is displaced accents, disturbed accents, yeah. Which I just love the concept of it, because it's not just you're accenting this beat, but you're accentuating it in a way. And something that's definitely preoccupied me in the last couple of years in my casual playing, like on this very kit, I call the practice kit, during, I guess it was late 08, coming into 09, I was at home for a period of time, and I would just come up here to the Drum Channel studios, and they set up this little kit, and I would just play. And for years and years, I play to get ready for a tour. I play to work on new drum parts. It's always with an aim and with a discipline in mind. This was just completely free. It just come up, there's nothing more important for me to do today than sit down at these drums and play whatever comes in.
No agenda.
No agenda whatsoever. And thus, I'd had that idea for years, and I understood that from reggae music and from West African music, that there was a complex interrelation, very subtle, and a lot of people wouldn't even hear it and feel it if we played it and described it. But it's something, I've described it as having two thoughts at the same time, singing two songs at the same time is what it is. Like if you were to give that as the upbeat, do that for me, would you? Or clap, yeah. So, boom, doom, 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 ga. You're playing two separate songs. It could be as simple as doom, bop, bop, bop. And so I worked on that and trained my foot to keep on that upbeat, not just to play it, but to feel it. So I'm feeling those two counterpoints at the same time, polyrhythms in effect. That's a very small thing, but it goes way back to the 70s of first understanding reggae music, first hearing that Billy Cobham upbeat ride. And again, it was necessary to feel two rhythms at the same time to accomplish that. In fact, I asked Billy about that because he is given credit, rightly so, I think, as introducing the whole world to that. And if you think how many fusion players and rock players have developed that, and certainly myself largely included, all kinds of hi-hat work based on that.
Right, right.
Upbeat ride. And he said he was in a bar someplace and heard a guy play it. It's like, yeah, just like I was saying, I was in a restaurant in Brazil and heard this amazing music. Well, the same for him, you know, this thing that he brought into music, and of course, him being ambidextrous too, even more powerful. But those are examples of little things that can be world-changing surprises, like epiphanies. But most of it's evolution for me, that I got into the ostinato idea years ago, and with the waltz pattern. And actually saw Bill Bruford do it at a concert in London at a university there. It was just him and Patrick Moraz had an acoustic project at the time, one of his Bill's Earthworks series. And he just played a version of Max Roach's The Drum Also Waltzes on a small acoustic kit. And that just, you know, I loved it at the time, but I didn't think too much about it. And then a few years later, I just got thinking about it for some reason. What could I do with that? You know, that's interesting. And sat down at the drums, and of course, boom, boom. That's all I could do at first. And then I could ding, 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 and just started building on the freedom, because I'm a slow learner. I know that about myself, but I'm a good practicer.
Right.
You know,
right.
I'm stubborn, tenacious about things like that. And if I can't do it, I won't say, oh, never mind. I'll say, oh, I got to do it.
Yeah,
it becomes a challenge. Right. And that has nourished me. I think that's early 90s probably, so almost 20 years. I still play that every day in my warm-up before the show, and it's still a foundation of my solo in the live performance too. And I still keep pushing what I can do with that. And over the last couple of years, I got in the polyrhythmic sense, I can play 7 over top of that. It was a huge accomplishment. And then I could play 4. I tried different time signatures once my feet could play that ostinato, and now I can raise the tempo, slow it down, really total freedom. So then I took that. That became, I have 3 rhythmic foundations of my solo, I think, are really good talking points for this. Because the waltz, again, still remains beautifully acoustic, a beautiful acoustic lift. And then I also did it on the electronic drums with ethnic sounds and all that. And the African waltz, I called it, where I had 3/4, and then I would play keyboard percussion parts and African hand drum parts assigned to triggers, foot triggers, and pads and that. And just took the waltz out of its context, because the waltz is extremely European, you know, extremely so.
Almost edgy. It can be almost edgy.
Yeah, yeah. So for me to take that back to Africa, as it were, and to put it in an African melodic and sonic framework was really was an interesting cross-pollination, because it's reverse, you know, taking Europe back to Africa, as it were. So that still continues to occupy me. And again, I can just sit down and play that for so long with such joy, because it's so comfortable and interesting. You know, practicing, if you keep practicing interesting, for a beginner, or 47 years I've been doing this, and I can still, you know, keep it interesting for myself. So that, the 3 progressions, I would start with the waltz, and then that polyrhythmic counterpoint thing I was talking about. Then I modulate into 4/4. But what's interesting is I discovered kind of accidentally that if the 3 is boom, bop, bop, boom, bop, bop, I went into 4, the modulation into 4 puns. It is a pun on those beats, because then I guess goom, ga, ga, goom, ga, ga, goom, ga. So it's still 1 bass drum beat and 2 hi-hat beats.
Just the way you put them on the measure. But
suddenly it's in 4, and those 2 are on the upbeat. So then I modulate that, and then getting freedom. I mentioned the counterpoint of singing 2 songs at the same time. So there are the upbeats and downbeats stated. Now to get free within that, so that I can play double up on those bass drum beats and keep that upbeat going all the time, but be not thinking it.
Sure.
I'm feeling it. Not just, again, you can't just tentatively hit that upbeat. It's got to be
that
felt.
Part of the music is just happening now.
Yeah.
And now
yeah.
you're
and now
detached,
I see how free I can get within
now
that.
You're walking on the top of that foundation.
And experimenting in that. I remember hearing, I guess it was, well, 2 things. Ian Wallace did a variation of it, but I first heard it on a classic track of Buddy's called Nutville. And Steve Smith recorded it when we did the Burning for Buddy classic, and it's got this ding, 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 this beautiful feel. And then Ian Wallace, the unfinished CD, unfortunately, before he passed away, that his widow Marge and his bandmates put together afterwards, he did a version of King Crimson in the Court of the Crimson King. And I know now from putting it back together that it was very daring. He was thinking, do I dare introduce a Latin feel into that? And sure enough, he did, and it's so powerful and so great. And I know from Marge now how proud he was of it. And and I came in actually here one day on the practice kit and said, I got to figure out how to play that. So I get the bass drum going, where does the hi-hat go? You know, I'm thinking, no, that doesn't feel right. And just over the course of messing with it, found out, you know, the upbeat again.
Sure.
And then, but this ostinato suddenly's got the push, it's got a disturbed accent in it. So to get free over it, and the classic Brazilian one, for instance, when I was in Brazil, another thing you can find out in another culture, I said, I think that's a Latin music ostinato, but I didn't know what it was called. I was hoping it was a dance or something, the mambo. I wanted it to be the mambo for some reason, because I was using it in the African section too, so I wanted it to be the African mambo. But it turns out it actually is a one of the, you know, Brazilian rhythms are like our rudiments. They all have names.
Right.
And it's called the xaxado, Xaxado. Xaxado is the name of that rhythm there, and it's most commonly used just with a 16th note, almost triplet feel across it.
Which is common with that.
That's the common one. So that was the first one that I was able to get down. And then I wanted to straighten those out. And then I wanted to get other things going across it and to become free with such, that's much more demanding than either the 3/4 or the 4/4 straight 4 ostinato. Suddenly you've got, your limbs are a whole lot busier, and that means your brain is too. So getting free with that was another new challenge to take on and try to put stuff over it. And my solo this tour was based upon, around those rhythmic fundamentals, but I tried also to be much more improvisational than ever before. And I spent probably the first 40 years, certainly the first 40 years of playing, being very methodical, detail-oriented, organizational, and compositional is what I call it. You know, my teacher, Freddie Gruber, says about that, you compose while you're playing. And that's great, and I accepted that, and you know, my drum parts certainly are built like that over the years, that as I played over them, I groomed them. And one fill would foreshadow another fill that would be developed more later, and the dynamics of that was my way of thinking. I like to say that drummers, if the music is honest, it reflects your personality. And I've always found that if I like a guy's drumming, chances are I'll like him, because, you know, the drumming is a reflection of the person, I believe, if it's
And you know what, and on that note, I've noticed that to do all the things that you do, your life appears very compartmentalized. If you're riding motorcycle, that's what you're doing. If you're writing, you're writing. If you're drumming, you're drumming. If you're rehearsing, you're rehearsing.
I think I phrased it like this at one time: you can do a lot of things, but not all at the same time. And
Exactly.
that is an important thing. And a lot of times, like if I've been on the road every 3 weeks, when I do come home, I tend to write and publish a story, because writing is such a nice relief from all the rest of it. Sure, I've gone out for 3 weeks and been motorcycling around and playing and all that, and that gives me a lot of material.
Right.
So just to be able to sit and use the other side of my brain and make a story out of that is wonderful recreation.
Right.
You know, it's a step away from all that. So in any case, I'd kind of accepted the definition and applied it myself. Yes, I'm a compositional drummer. And then in the same breath, I went, wait a minute, I want to be an improvisational drummer, you know? So I also pushed myself out of my comfort zone. And even my solos in the past were always improvised over a carefully structured framework, but I wanted even that to be freer. To say, okay, it's a performance in front of people, so it's not going to be like just coming here and playing for a couple hours for myself. It is a performance, and I want it to have a certain standard of repeatability, you know, so that it's going to be satisfying for me and for the audience every night. So that's a hard line to walk too. Right. But I did work over the course of the tour, achieved that, and I think we did 44 shows on this first part of the tour in this summer and this fall. And towards the end, I was getting so outside. I remember I thought one day, bolero. I'm going to put bolero over top of the xaxado one, and did it, you know. And what I love about my warm-up too, it has the same freedom, is that about half hour before showtime, I go in and play for 20 minutes and just play. It's the same thing. And I use those 3 rhythmic elements that are my foundation right now, but there's no consequences. It doesn't matter what happens. So I would just, in my warm-up that night, I tried putting a bolero over top of it, and it worked. It's okay, and it went in my solo that night. And that certain freshness that I loved, and I've been building on more the last couple tours, is being able to do that. Just say, okay, and I've almost got this, I'm going to try it tonight.
Do you ever catch Lauren going,
Oh, often this tour, because he was used to a very structured thing, and he has a lot of cues, and all of the samples that I use And I have what's called the steampunk set, is a lot of pre-industrial sounds, a lot of metal and wood and steam sort of sounds and all that, which was interesting because on the previous tour I was using very industrial sounds, and I was trying to make a musical solo piece. One of the movements was very industrial, and this time I'm going pre-industrial, I thought, and I knew what I was after, but I hadn't verbalized it yet.
Right.
So often happens. And just as I was auditioning the sounds here to put that sound, that setup together for that solo. But yeah, Lauren, a perfect example, is used to very strict cues and durations of a passage and all that. And the cues, I always tell them, when I do this twice, change that program and the spin halfway through the solo. We always do a 180-degree spin so the electronic kit faces forward. And then I give them a cue and it comes back. Well, the cues were that much improvised too. And I really was putting myself out there because I had not dared to compose in front of people, I guess is what you'd say.
Right.
And yes, I would figure out a movement, but there were surprises come along too. I was working on over top of one of those ostinatos. I had a double hand crossover on the floor toms over here. I said, okay, I got that together, and against that ostinato, that's gonna work, I can do that. Well, I go on stage, and on my stage, the floor toms have two V-drum pads on top of them, and I went, flick, the drumstick goes flying.
Encroaching on your airspace.
I hadn't figured it out yet, so I go, oh, wait a minute, oh, that was weird. So I pick up another stick, go, flick, oh, I guess that doesn't work now. So that that was a lesson and a good one of going out there with that daring.
Yeah, sure.
That I know this works on my little practice kit, but not figuring out yet. Duh. Yeah. But there were and again, no consequences there. It's embarrassing, but you pick up another stick and keep playing. The song isn't wrecked.
Right.
But yeah, it was. Hard for me, to get outside of my comfort zone. Again, I'm comfortable being organized, and I'm comfortable having the details all knitted together so I know what I'm going to play.
Right.
And this way, I knew where I was going because I still had a structure, like I said, that built rhythmically, and then I used those same ostinato foundations on the electronic kit, and then wound up with, I have a selection of big band triggers that I've used for a number of years now. And again, I would usually work out an arrangement for them, and then in the past I've gone into 1 o'clock jump, or always the tunes I did on the Buddy tribute, right. 1 o'clock jump, Cottontail, or this time Love for Sale. And even that part I was able to keep very free because it's hard not to. And I talked to a jazz musician about this, that it's awful hard when you improvise something that you love not to do it again the next night.
Sure.
And that's what had always happened to me in the past, is I put a solo together, or even a drum part for a song, it's always improvised at the beginning. I don't write out a chart.
Well, it's creation, yeah.
Yeah, and my approach to working out a drum part for a Rush song, for example, is trying everything that might work and taking out everything that doesn't. Mm-hmm. So that it is, by nature, it's as free as can be. Again, no consequences, because when I work on drum parts, I just get a demo for the guys and play along with it.
Sure.
So there's zero consequences, no one's hearing it, I don't have to impress anyone. I'm just experimenting with what might work. So the solos in the past have been that, and then I find something I like. Well, yeah, it is awful hard the next night not to do that. So I have to push myself again and say, okay, I'm going to start with a different figure every night for a start. In the last 2 tours, I think I've done that, where I start on the other side of the kit. And even the previous tour, Snakes and Arrows, I would think about what that figure would be. I would make it different every night, but I wrote about one standing on stage just before I went on. What should I start my solo with tonight, But now I don't even let myself do that.
Right.
I just take a deep breath, pick up a fresh pair of sticks, and go.
It's almost like now you are used to being on the trapeze, and now you're removing the net.
Anything takes practice, anything takes work, and improvisation more than anything, I think. Some drummers just start out that free and never play anything the same way twice ever.
Right.
And I wouldn't want to be like that either.
Yeah, they call that jazz.
Exactly. Steve Smith and I had that conversation because his son happened to be a fan of the band, and he came to see us in one of the Northern California gigs, and we were talking about that, and I was at the time beginning my personal challenge into becoming more improvisational. And I said, our songs are really, for the most part, very carefully arranged, and a lot of times played exactly like the records because we work so hard on that performance. If we can get it that good again, that's enough. I always use Tom Sawyer as the example, but many others are like that if I can play that song right, I'm happy.
Sure.
I don't have to make it different every night.
And every night's a chance to get it right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that is the way I work and the way the band works. We do share that desire to get it right, and then to get it right every time.
Sure.
How little of the show needed to be or was improvised, it's grown more as all of us. Interestingly, on this tour, again, after having played together for 36 years, we still elevated a band as a band this time, and everybody was pushing themselves in the improvisational way. Because everybody tends to pick up the other guy's preconceptions and interests, and I know all of us do that. We all share, if one guy's working in a certain direction, all of us go, hey, yeah, what about that for me?
Yeah, and over that kind of time, you guys are almost working under one brain. I mean, you've got to be so familiar with one another's output, musically and inspirationally, yeah. And I had the opportunity to be at the Vegas show, and I mean, I noticed that in the first hour of the show, there was some of that going on. So.
Yeah, and so much unspoken communication, which I really love too. And one thing that makes it easy to work on our individual parts separately now is, yes, I...